We will now be focusing on early childhood, and that is basically from ages 3 to 6 years of age. We'll start off by looking at the physical and cognitive development. Please note that in early childhood, we find that the annual growth is not as rapid as it was in infancy and in toddlerhood. We find that on average, there's about 5 pounds that are gained per year, and we also see that there is a lot more slim and thinner bodies in individuals, and that is because the baby fat is no longer necessary as it was in earlier stages. We also find that the torso begins to accommodate for the internal organs, and that allows for a straightening of the back and of the spine. In this picture, you could see how those changes are seen with this child who is a toddler, and their head is relatively bigger in comparison to the body. And then, as you see, this little girl here, who is probably about 5 or 6 years old, is her torso has straightened up, and there's also less fat in her body, and that is again something that we see because of changes in hormones, as well as the no longer necessity of the baby fat. The health of individuals is always important, but in previous years and decades, the health of the teeth was not one of the most important ones or addressed. We now find that the dental health is extremely important for children earlier on, and the reason why is because the primary teeth, which are what's known as baby teeth, can affect permanently the permanent teeth once the primary teeth are gone. We find that typically the loss of primary teeth occurs by the end of the preschool years, and this is something that can be expedited or delayed depending on genetic components as well as environmental components. For example, we find that children who are exposed to secondhand smoking typically have higher tooth decay because the tobacco would basically suppress the immune system of the child, which would weaken its ability to fight bacteria that's responsible for tooth decay. This is important because as you look at the bigger picture of this, if a child has bad teeth going into adulthood, that can imply a reduced pull for employment opportunities. It could also affect their social skills, self-esteem, and various other components that were originally not thought of. Now we understand the importance of dental health, and it is something that researchers have focused on and continue to push forth as a key component of health. As we mentioned before, the cerebral cortex and the brain continues developing into adulthood, and during early childhood, we see that the brain increases in weight and volume from 70 to 90%. We see that it's not fully developed yet, and this explains how the child may be able to engage in certain tasks but yet not be able to master some others. For example, the things that can and are improved are physical coordination. At this point, more so than in toddlerhood, the child is able to run and jump, and they're able to do more coordinated activities. Doing cartwheel is quite common for children during those years in early childhood, and the more muscle they get, the easier and smoother those movements will be. Their cognition is also something that continues to be sharpened, and their perception, their ability to pay attention, their ability to recall through memory, and their use of language and imagination tends to also be superior to what it used to be. Again, this is not a given, but this is something that would need to be stimulated through conversations and interactions with their caregivers. Around 4 years of age, the prefrontal cortex actually have an amount of synapses, which, if you remember from previous chapters, are the connections between neurons. And we find that the synapses and the connections that are made between them are twice as much as the ones that we have in adult value. In lamest terms, what this means here is that a child has a lot more capacity to learn new things. If you remember when we discussed language, a child who is exposed to multiple phonemes is able to pronounce the vowels and the consonants in the way that everybody else in different languages does. But as we start being focused on and exposed to one language, we begin to reduce our ability to maybe roll our R's or pronounce vowels the way others do. So this synaptic abundance is what leads to a child's ability to comprehend languages and learn languages and be able to do various different tasks. In fact, some people argue that the best time to expose children to multiple languages and other tasks such as sports and learning how to play musical instruments is during early adulthood. And the prefrontal cortex susceptibility is what makes it a prime age for these skills to be learned. It is important that we note that the prefrontal cortex has been associated with our ability to control our behavior. This is connected to our ability to regulate our emotions. So, this is assuming that we have mastered that, or at least have gained some control over that. Our ability to pay attention expands from before, which were limited us to very short periods of time where we could pay attention. Now we could pay attention for extended periods of time. Our working memory, our ability to process things that are there and recalling things, and also our ability to plan and organize behavior, which fills in or comes into play with delaying the gratification, as discussed in the previous chapter. What we find is responsible for the ability for us to do these things with greater sophistication and ease is something that we call synaptic pruning. And synaptic pruning is that component that, if you remember from, again, previous chapters, is use it or lose it. If you do not use some of those synapses or synaptic connections that have been made, then you lose those, and that basically keeps us from being able to perform that task. So if you are exposed to a language where you have to roll your R, then you are making use of it, and those synaptic connections are strengthened. But if you do not get exposed to a language where the R's need to be rolled, then you are experiencing synaptic pruning, and this keeps you from engaging or exercising that particular skill. Synaptic pruning typically falls to an adult level around the age of 10, and that's where we begin to struggle to do other things. So, if you have met someone who was brought to the United States maybe after the age of 10 and been here for years, you may realize that they may have learned the language, but there's an accent that is still reflective of their primary language. Whereas if someone comes to the United States younger than the age of 10, then they may master the language and be able to be bilingual and be fluent in both of those, making use of all the phonemes. And we also find that synaptic pruning, in addition to limiting us, it also has its good things. It actually makes us efficient at what we do. So it doesn't require a lot of effort for someone to roll their R's if the synaptic connections have been strengthened. So you become a specialist at speaking Spanish, and then you're able to then do it without much thought. Someone who is learning Spanish as a second language after the age of 10, they are not going to be able to speak it with as much ease as, again, someone who strengthened those synaptic connections. The cerebellum is a part of the hindbrain, or the brain, the part of the brain that's toward the back, and not part of the cerebral cortex. This is a structure that is quite large, and it aids in the balance and body movement in adults. We've actually found this through studies in which individuals who are under the influence of alcohol are unable to walk in a straight line, and part of that is because of the impact that the cerebellum has had because of alcohol consumption. As we get older, these connections, or these fibers, begin to link to the cerebral cortex, the new brain, and this is something that grows from birth through the preschool years. And this is what allows a child to be able to coordinate and balance their movements. So playing hopscotch, throwing a ball in a coordinated manner is something that is made possible by these connections between the cerebellum and the cerebral cortex. Children who often suffer from shaken baby syndrome often affect the cerebellum, and they sometimes display motor or and cognitive deficits. And by motor, sometimes they may fall, lose their balance, or their cognitive skills may be a little bit delayed, or what they call a retardation component. The word retardation is offensive when used out of context, but the word retarded or retardation comes from the word tardy. So if a child is supposed to be performing at the age of 5, but they're still performing at the age of 3, there's a delay. They're tardy to that, and that's what we refer to when there are some damage. There's some damage with the brain. The hippocampus is a structure that plays a role in memory consolidation. When you get exposed to content, you are trying to memorize that so that on exam day you could recall it easily and be able to use it when you are given assignments. The hippocampus does that for us. We have found this through studies in which rats and other species have sustained injuries to the hippocampus, and they forget things that they knew for a long time. We've also seen this in adults who have been victims of car accidents or head trauma, and even the most primitive information, such as where they've lived for the past 20 years, they may forget when there's damage to the hippocampus. We find that during infancy and middle childhood, there is a rapid synapse formation in the hippocampus, and this is what allows us to be students and perform well. The memory consolidation will depend heavily on sleeping, and so if you're a college student that crams at night before going to take an exam at 8 a.m., we actually find that you'd be better off studying throughout the evening and then sleeping so that your brain can consolidate the information you exposed it to. Some of the best ways that the hippocampus performs is, again, when you expose it to language, let it rest, and then sleep so that it could wake up refreshed. We also find that the hippocampus is present when in our childhood we begin to make memories. When you ask someone what's their earliest recollection of their life, oftentimes they may point toward an event that may have occurred at the age of 4 or 3 in some cases. And this is because prior to the age of 3, the hippocampus is not fully functional. And while it's already there, its inactivity leads to something we call infantile amnesia, which is our inability to recall anything before the age of 3 years old. The amygdala is another component of the old brain, and this is involved in processing emotional information. Specifically, it's been used to try to understand our frightened responses. So it's involved in fear and aggression. And so we find that this is also making a lot of connections with our cerebral cortex, especially when dealing with strong emotions. When I was a child, I witnessed somebody get run over by a bus, and this generated some shift in my brain. And for many years thereafter, I remember being kind of frightened of buses and of big streets. And this is because the amygdala had made some connections with the emotion, but it also made connections with the hippocampus, so I could remember, as well as the cerebral cortex. This is something that, again, emerges in early childhood, and we find that this part of the brain, when we spy on the brain through brain scanning techniques, we find that this part would be very active in children who would be anxious. Anybody that suffers from anxiety would find a lot of activity or have a lot of activity in the amygdala. Those who are a lot more relaxed and at ease, they'd find that there is little activity in the amygdala. The corpus callosum is a bundle of fibers that unites the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. It runs across from the front of your head toward the back, toward the top of the brain. And this is believed to be responsible for the smooth coordination and communication between the left and the right hemisphere. If you remember, the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body and vice versa. Well, in order for you to have a smooth movement, we need to have a coordination and communication between both hemispheres. And we find that this is particularly essential and helpful when completing complex tasks and also completing multiple tasks. We find that this part of the brain, there's a peak in the synaptic production between the ages of 3 and 6. And this is something that will continue through middlehood and child and adolescence. As you can see, the brain and its various parts are key in our experiences and our behavior and the emotions that we feel. However, this is not limited to physical things. There's actually a lot of environmental factors that contribute to our emotional well being. And we find that individuals who live in very stressful homes, especially preschoolers, they often suffer from more respiratory illnesses and injuries. And this is believed to be the result of frustration and irritability that leads to the inability to regulate the emotions that they're feeling. We also find that extreme emotional deprivation can lead to something that is known as psychosocial dwarfism. And this is basically a stunting of the physical growth that occurs between the ages of 2 to 15 years of age. Oftentimes, if a child is not cared for, neglected by the parents, or in an environment where not even bad attention is paid to them, they often are shorter than their age mates by a significant amount. In some cases, it could be genetics and it could be nutrition, but when those factors are checked and we find that there is neglect, emotional neglect, now they can actually have an effect on their secretion of the hormone that is known as the GH or the growth hormone. It is important that we sleep, especially when we're younger, to grow. And children who have emotional disturbances are likely to not get good sleep, and as a result of that, they would not get a good secretion of GH. The total sleep will continue to decline as we get older. We find that for 2 to 3 year olds, they often sleep between 11 and 12 hours. 4 to 6 year olds often sleep between 10 and 11. And then after that, for preschoolers, it would be about a 1 to 2 hour nap that they would take per day and during noon. Again, this is important because it is while we sleep that we experience the most growth because of hormonal changes, as well as allowing the hippocampus to consolidate the information we may have just been exposed to. In fact, even as an adult, if you are in the habit of taking naps regularly, you're doing things better than the majority of us. There are some cultural differences in sleep habits and problems. Uh, Caucasian American children have been uh, known to co-sleep less likely to co-sleep with parents or siblings than African American age mates, and this sadly is a reflection of sometimes disparity that exists in socioeconomic statuses, in which individuals may be able to afford multiple bedrooms for children, whereas in certain among certain people that may not be possible. So co-sleeping with parents or siblings is quite common. Um, Also, we find that difficulty falling asleep is most common in early childhood, and this is not due to insomnia, but often because they do not want to go to sleep. So they may even ask a parent for water or milk while in bed, or may even want to brush their teeth while in bed. And it's not necessarily that they're responsible and have great dental hygiene, but they may just simply be avoiding sleeping time. Sleep disturbances are not unusual among children. We find that about 50% of 3 to 6 year olds experience nightmares from time to time, and this is because of what they may have been exposed to during the day. It is important that children not watch content that could be disturbing for them because they have difficulty separating fantasy from reality. I once heard a parent say, I teach my son that monsters don't really exist. I let him know that that's all fantasy. Now, the thing is that children can't separate that. As adults, we may be able to, but children alone may struggle with that. Sleep terrors are also similar to nightmares, but these consist of arousing and awakening from deep sleep. These individuals often wake up with heavy breathing and sometimes sweating and an increased heart rate because of what they were experiencing at night. And these are often experienced by children, but as we get older, they subside. One of the things that parents often complain about with preschoolers is that they may not eat as much as they used to. And this is because their growth has slowed down from where it used to be, and we no longer need as much nutrients or food. We also find that preschoolers often limit their diet to whatever's advertised on Nickelodeon or these other channels that children may watch, when in actuality, what's recommended is that preschoolers should be eating the same foods as adults, but just in smaller quantities. So, vegetables, protein should be given to them and not necessarily give them their own kids' meals, which are packed with sugar and not a lot of healthy nutrients. The environment that we are in also has a lot to do with the choices that we'll make in terms of eating. We find that children will often imitate whatever their parents eat. So if the mothers drink milk, then they're likely to have children who would also drink milk. We find that also the consumption of sweet drinks like Capri Sun and Sunny Delight and all that will lead to milk avoidance. And milk alone is sweet, but once they try something sweeter, then they may kind of have an aversion toward milk. And last, also sometimes the way that parents may force a meal on a child. Sometimes they force the child to eat, and they may even bribe the child, saying, if you don't finish your food, then you won't get dessert. If you don't finish your food, I won't let you play. And oftentimes they bribe them to eat, and it kind of makes it seem as a punishment. Instead, they recommend that they make a meal time a fun time with a lot of activities and different colors, and make the child be part of maybe setting the table so that they could look forward to eating and not necessarily view it as a punishment. Here you see a few tips that are described for getting the child or encouraging the child to eat well. And oftentimes, again, smaller portions and making different colors, often of providing a variety for the individual, and maybe even having nice conversations with the child as to how their day was. And if I may just add in here, avoiding electronic devices while you're having dinner. That is very, very important as well. And the whole point is to get children to look forward to eating and enjoying a good time while they're having dinner or lunch.